We're delighted to have Tony Jebara, VP of Engineering and Head of AI ML at Spotify, join us for a fireside chat hosted by Coslin's VP of Engineering, Ronald Hobbs. Tony will share insights on building some of the world's most sophisticated personalization systems.
Thanks, Jillian. Welcome, Tony.
Thanks, great to be here. Thank you, Jillian.
Excellent. So obviously working at Spotify, huge product, lots of users. One of the things that I was quite interested in is, well, how do you see the difference in AI and AI adoption between a B2C type product and like Spotify and enterprise environments? You know, what makes each uniquely challenging or even uniquely rewarding?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we definitely have some enterprise-level AI. We have AI for helping our developers and increase productivity in-house. We also use AI for partner integrations and AI for creators, which you could think of as a little like enterprise because, you know, you're working and providing tools for one of your customers. But then we also have a large consumer-facing AI offering, and it's very different because of the scale. So we've got things like AI DJ and our AI playlisting, and there you've got to run that for, you know, hundreds of millions of users. Right now we're in the 600 and such million monthly active users. So you can't just say, hey, let's let every user do deep research and we'll foot the bill. That gets very expensive very quickly every time they open the app. And so you want to get something that has the right ROI, and the way you measure the ROI is very different. Of course, on the enterprise side, you might say ROI means I save time, I can do some research more quickly, I can get a report done faster, I can, you know, save some data hunting, data cleaning, etc. Productivity, maybe somebody gets faster at PRs or code reviews or other types of things like this. But on the consumer side, we measure the upside really on our core business, which is increasing user engagement, consumption, and retention. So are you getting more users to stream more? That's the main kind of ROI numerator. And so performance matters there a lot, of course. You want to have good AI to do that, but you can't just throw in the most expensive models because you also have to divide by the denominator, which is the cost, you know, cost per token and things like that, and that can quickly add up. So you end up not always going for the most expensive AI model. You have to have the economics work out right, where you say, okay, I've increased streaming causally, let's say, but I can't afford to do this for 100 million users or hundreds of millions because it just costs too much. So then you say, how do I take a smaller model and maybe optimize it and distill it or fine tune it so I can do that at a better cost and even better latency as well, which is super important for our users, so that you can get something out at scale. And so that's one of the key kind of ratios you're looking at in the consumer side. But it's fun to do that because you say, okay, I built something great. How do I get it to more people? Oh, I can get this big model to show the smaller model what its output would have been and fine tune and distill and improve there. Of course, you may need to have, you know, open source models for that or open weight models because you can't do this all the time with the closed models. But that's, I think, the calculus, part of the calculus of being in the direct to consumer with things like AI DJ, AI playlist, some of our AI merchandising technologies as well, where you're doing this literally hundreds of millions of times per day for hundreds of millions of users.
Fabulous, thank you. Yeah, I think that we were talking earlier around as you sort of step up these magnitudes of scale, how the game changes completely. So being able to dig into those hyper-optimized points, being able to use smaller models or more constrained models so that they perform well on a particular task, that's a really interesting aspect. But how do you then, does it feel like there's an optimal point where you've got the maximum amount of functionality and the minimal amount of cost, or do you feel like it kind of comes and goes and you have to experiment a little?
So it definitely comes and goes, and you know, every month or every week there's a new model out there, so you need to maintain optionality. You don't want to be stuck with a model because you've built everything on just one type of backbone, and then there's a DeepSeek moment and you want to be able to try that out. So how do you set things up so that you can swap out models, you can A/B test models against each other? So we've talked a little bit about causality and A/B testing. can you A/B test a cheaper model when it's available versus the current model and say, oh, I have better performance, similar latency, slightly lower cost, let me go for that. And so that's an important thing, and you need the right investments in infrastructure so that you can do these types of tests. You can, try different LLMs and see which ones are doing better. You can add more capabilities. You can increase costs with more parameters or more reasoning and say, is that worth it? Do I get an increased engagement, or is it just cosmetic and just more AI without real value? And so then you can say that's not worth the extra cost. And so there's definitely this aspect of scale, cost, and optionality, which I think is super important. You don't want to just be locked into one solution and then, there's a competitor and you can't even try it out and test it out.
Mm-hmm. And how easy is that at your scale to be able to just try something and test something? Does it become even more constrained because there's so much that would actually hit that initial test that it becomes a test is almost a release in that regard?
So, testing is always expensive. It's not going to be zero cost. And you don't want to just test when you don't have a hypothesis or confidence ahead of time. So you don't want to just randomly test things. You sometimes need to do a little bit of offline and say, oh, this model offline, we can dark load the model before we actually test it. We can try offline evaluations and say, oh, on these types of metrics, it seems better before we spin up a whole A/B test, which also means we have, real traffic in front of real users, and you have to be careful because those models might have different failure points or different safety profiles, et cetera. So, but at some point in the day, you do have to test these things and see what happens with real users at scale, and then, you do a rollout. But A/B testing is really part of the Spotify culture, so that's really been a boon. We started with A/B testing for all sorts of, UX experiments and traditional machine learning. And so that was already really well established. So then when you have the AI revolution, generative AI everywhere, you want to make sure that you bring that same testing culture into the consumer AI experience as well.
Okay. Talking about the switch into generative AI, obviously in music and within the music streaming, we had an earlier conversation around it's relatively easy when it's text and people are using text because that tokenizes well with these models. But obviously the content that you deal with is not always that easy. Can you talk a little bit more about the different kinds of content that you deal with and the models and how they apply to those?
Sure. So that's a great question. We do have lots of kind of text from the transcripts of our podcasts and our audiobooks. So we have audiobooks on Spotify, we've got podcasts, and we've got music. Of course, I should have started with music because that's the big one. But at least for audiobooks and for podcasts, we can start with a transcript, and that tells you a lot about the content. And so we've been actually transcribing and understanding what's in the transcripts, whenever we have the rights to do so, let's say, and we can understand this is a humorous podcast about, philosophy of whatever, and then that gives us a way to target and recommend it to the right listeners. And there it's just language, let's say, so an LLM can help us with that problem. We've already been using LLMs to better understand, let's say, talk content. For music content, you could look at lyrics, but those are really not capturing as much about the content. And it turns out, deep learning and collaborative filtering techniques are really much better at music recommendation. You listen to this and then you listen to that, or user A likes songs 1 and 2, user B likes songs 2 and 3, so introduce song 3 to user A and introduce song 1 to user B. I mean, that's the vanilla collaborative filtering. But most recently, we've been seeing some techniques coming out of a bunch of research labs where you don't just feed large language models with text tokens. We've seen multimodal tokens. Everybody's heard of, vision LLMs with vision tokens, image tokens, and audio tokens. Well, it turns out you can also feed LLMs with catalog tokens. So what's in your content catalog, that could be tokenized. And you can also tokenize what your users are doing and what they're interested in. And that can also be turned into a language. Now you have to be smart about how you do this so you don't explode the vocabulary of the LLM. But then what you're basically saying is you see an intermingled text sequence with tracks and with other catalog items and with user actions, and you start to learn kind of the co-occurrence statistics. Just like LLMs are learning co-occurrence of words, you start to learn which things go well together and which go well with certain words. So then you can say, oh, I want a humorous podcast that's discussing, let's say, philosophy, and it knows what that means, and it knows what in your catalog actually contains that because it's seen it appear with those words in these types of data sets. So that's really where LLMs are going. They're not just text. Anything in principle could be tokenized. Well, not anything, but a lot more than just the text.
Excellent. One of the things that then becomes a challenge, right, is then, especially in an app like Spotify, where you've got really highly optimized UX and really highly optimized interactions, which have obviously been tuned to a paradigm where people are skipping or they're just moving on to the next track. But then if they want to start saying, okay, I want to listen to something that's a bit more humorous, or I want to listen to this track and I want something that's a little bit more smooth or a little bit more jazzy, then you have to start evolving your interaction mechanisms to be able to allow for that. And that in turn then can drive further complexity into these things. Is that sort of how you see it's evolving?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very much on that evolution, I would say, at Spotify. So of course, a long time ago, it was just here's your homepage and here's your search page. But now we launched about a year ago today AI playlisting, which is a conversational way of finding what to listen to. And so if you go into your library and you click plus and you say, I want an AI playlist, you start to have a text conversation with Spotify, and you can ask questions about what you're feeling, what you're looking for, and it'll talk back and ask you, okay, well, what about this and a little more of that? And then it'll actually go out and create a playlist based off of that conversation. So, our agents aren't just talking to you, then they're looking at the conversation and what went back and forth and saying, okay, now I know what to do. And then it goes out and agentically creates this AI playlist that you can, push play and start listening to, or further edit, or come back to the conversation and say, oh, you've got too many instrumental tracks here. I want more vocals. And it'll say, okay, great. It'll go out and clean it up and come back with a different playlist. So that's already available. It's rolled out in the US and several other countries. So, you can try that. And that's opening up kind of a conversational UX in addition to the current navigational UX you're all familiar with. So you can scroll and click around your homepage. You can search, of course, which has been around for a long, long time. But search isn't a full conversation. But now with AI playlists, you can have a full conversation and say, I'm in the mood for, some instrumental music from the 1980s, all girl band only, and just a little more energy so I can go for a jog. And it'll find 20 tracks that really fit that moment. And that wasn't possible without LLMs just recently. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Very cool. And you also mentioned, so obviously there's collaborative recommendation, the sort of standard cross match and between what people listen to. Do you see room for further collaboration? So now that you've got an agent to collaborate with, what about bringing more people into that conversation so you can start having collaborative playlists with other people?
So we do have some of these collaborative playlists. We've got this ability to blend your playlists with your friends' playlists and say, I want to listen to something that's a blend of both of our playlists. Here's a collaborative blend. And we've also offered that where you can blend your playlist with a playlist from a famous star. Like you can say, I want to blend my playlist with a Lady Gaga playlist. And there you go. It's a blended playlist. So we already offer that. We offer the ability to have social jam style listening where everybody can connect when they're in the same, let's say, Wi-Fi environment and start adding tracks and recommendations into kind of a joint listening session. And so that's already happening. At some point, you can imagine in the future, well, okay, your agent knows you, it recommends for you. You can start saying, hey, recommend something before the people who arrive show up. I'm going to have the following 5 friends over, and I'd like to create mood music for a dinner party I'm going to throw for all of us. And it should match the food for the dinner because we're going to make it kind of a Latin-inspired kind of set of dishes. And so pick music that'll be good for all 5 guests and matching the food theme, and that could happen one day with kind of a multi-agent approach. But yeah, we're viewing this future where, we've heard some of this already being spoken by folks like Satya Nadella, for example. All apps will become agents, and so your app that's in your pocket, well, maybe one day it'll be your music agent or your Spotify agent, and you'll say, oh, please talk to so-and-so's Spotify agent and so-and-so's calendar agent, and find a time for all of us to get together and have a dinner party. And so we can imagine that being something that happens in this multi-agent future. We're not quite there yet, but I'm just conjecturing. Yeah. But then that's the nice thing about agents and apps behaving like agents, as opposed to the classical navigational app we're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the one bit that you mentioned there that's really interesting to me is this idea of an agent really understanding you and almost becoming your representative, as opposed to an agent that you that's someone else owns that you just interact with. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's it's a potential game shift in terms of, once I feel like the agent belongs to me and it has my best interests at heart.
Yeah, I mean that's really what we're hoping for. We notice when people talk about Spotify, they say it's my Spotify. They view it as their version of the product. It's their agent already in some ways. And so we want, this new AI technology to even further that kind of relationship and to make it feel like, hey, this is my AI agent, my app, my, experience, and I can ask it things and it'll get things done for me in a very personalized way and not in a generic way.
Yeah. And one of the other interesting challenges that I would see arising from that is the feedback that you get. I mean, you'll get a massive amount of feedback. One of the challenges that you probably already have to face is, how do you get signal out of all of that feedback?
Yeah, totally. So you do want to instrument your app and get a lot more signal and understand what's really working with users and log things and A/B test things as well. And so that's a great way to get the real value. I mean, at the end, AI is only useful in the value it shows and the jobs to be done that it does for real users. You can only go so far with the cool whiz-bang demo, and yes, it's great to have a demo everyone uses for a few minutes and it looks exciting, but it doesn't create that long-term value. So those types of things we have to be very careful of, that you want to test with real A/B tests and say, oh, we actually increased engagement, consumption, retention, and real human consumption of human creation, and that's kind of our driving North Star. So we're increasing how much humans are listening to other humans. That's the goal. Versus we just created a cool demo, and then you get excitement for a week, and then people move on to the next cool demo. And so that's when you're building AI for AI's sake, as opposed to a real value, a job to be done, a real need. We do user research. We look at how people are talking out in social media and say, oh, this is a frustration. People can't get this done. That's what you should be, focusing on in your next generative AI project, not just wowing people for a temporary, coolness moment, and then there's no real value afterwards.
Yeah, I love that. Users consuming content created by users. That we were talking about earlier, where there's so much challenge against AI is where it's taking away the creation part and then sort of stepping into that. But that Spotify's focusing on really maximizing both the creation and the consumption is quite cool.
Yeah, so for example, we don't count how many minutes AI DJ talks to you as consumption. We don't say, oh great, you listen to AI DJ for 43 minutes today. That is a goose egg. How much did AI DJ increase your listening of real music and audiobooks and podcasts? And that's what we measure as the success of that product, let's say. And similarly for other AI experiences, AI playlists, we don't want you to just have the conversations in our AI playlisting feature, and then you try it, but you never really listen to the music. That was just AI time, and it's not the real value we're trying to deliver. So it's, yes, we need you to start there, but the ultimate goal is, did you listen to real music after that AI playlisting session?
Excellent, thank you. Perhaps as a last question for me, so as you having all of these capabilities, how is your team evolving? How are the people and the skills that you've got within your teams, how are they evolving to both capitalize on this, but also to maximize what you can get out of these kind of technologies?
So the teams are always getting more sophisticated with the AI technologies we're adopting. That's happening across the board in the engineering, in research, in data science. Even the product managers and the designers all are using more AI tools and more of the latest AI models. We're using a lot of the protocols that are being created as well. So everyone's got to stay with the leading edge. And that's, I think, an exciting place to be because you're always keeping up and you're self-disrupting in a way. You don't want to be stuck on your old stack. So we're always evolving our technology stack. But we're also encouraging everyone to use AI tools for productivity and for understanding what's going on in a code base rather than going and tapping in a Jira on the shoulder or waiting hours for a code review. Can you automate that and accelerate the work because you can ask an AI assistant or you can get a code review done by AI with initial comments and unblock, oh, there's a comment here. This looks like this code may have some security issues. Things like that, I think, is really accelerating how work gets done day to day.
Excellent, thank you. Those were the majority of my questions. Any other areas you want to cover?
I think there's a lot of great consumer products facing hundreds of millions of users today, so always eager to hear your questions on how they're working for you. So AI DJ, AI playlisting, some of the ways of explaining what the content's about is being done with AI. Of course, recommending what content you should see on your homepage is done with AI. But we're always eager to hear from everyone and user research. What are the things that are working and clicking, and getting that extra moment of discovery, which we care a lot about. It's not just listening more, but listening to new things more as well. And so I think that is, that's what we're always trying to ideate and come up with ways to even improve beyond what we already have.
Yeah, no, that serendipitous discovery of something new and cool.
Yeah.
Always the best moment in the Spotify. Yeah. Any questions in the room? Yes, at the back.
Spotify is a consumer application.
Sorry, let me bring you the mic.
Since Spotify is a consumer application, what is your biggest concern on cost on token to you?
Well, of course, cost is a concern because some of these AI models get quite expensive per token. If you're running at scale with hundreds of millions of users, using them, hours per day, that quickly adds up. Another concern with these AI models is safety. So we're very rigorous about what our AI models can say and do, and we pass them through safety models, which themselves are AI models, to make sure that they don't say something that would be considered offensive or unsafe or unsavory. And so that's another part of the cost. So you're basically running double costs whenever it's something facing the consumer, because unlike an employee using an AI tool, you have to make sure that you protect against the breadth of things that can happen in the outside world, which you can't do when you're controlling the AI in your company, let's say. So that's been another ongoing doubling of the cost as well there.
Just to kind of dig into that one for a sec. When you talk about protecting the consumer, does that lead to a lot of false negatives as well, where you're sort of overprotecting and therefore not making the optimal recommendation because you're trying to be too protective?
Well, there is always a ROC curve, if you want to think of it that way, where you want to make sure you don't get too many false negatives, but you also want to really be careful what you have at hundreds of millions of users scale, because all it takes is one, let's say, bad example to get blown up by social media and the press, and then people get the wrong impression of what you're doing. And so then we are quite careful in how we let the AI talk and what you can and can't say to the AI. And you also need to ring fence the AI agents. So the AI playlist, for example, the minute we launch that, everyone is trying at scale to make it do silly things and say silly things and take screenshots and show them to their friends. And people will use it to tell me how to make a dish, let's say, or tell me how to make something that a weapon. I mean, of course, we don't want those types of things happening with our AI models. So we have these additional layers to filter out those types of interactions.
We notice the same thing with data scientists, by the way. So as soon as you give them an agent, the first thing they try and do is break it, which is always fun. You had another question over here.
Loud, sorry. You mentioned like discoverability being important, like showing your users new things. And when I talk to an LLM, like I know I can set the temperature, which is like how crazy it can go, how creative it can go. Maybe this feature already exists, but I'm in the UK, and so on my Spotify, I can't, tell it how different I want to see things. Like sometimes I get some of the songs I listen to all the time in a new playlist. Have you considered like giving that temperature control to the user in terms of just new things and discoverability of new music?
So that's a great question. We played with temperature, and you can kind of ask the LLM to be more kind of provocative in its outputs, but you can also just prompt it. And so if you talk to the AI playlist and you say, I want something new, I want to discover something very different, then through prompting, you'll get a similar behavior. So you can either do it that way or by dialing up the temperature. The temperature dialing can sometimes have unforeseen effects, though, because then if you dial up the temperature, all of a sudden the agentic flow may not work, because when you ask it, hey, I need to produce the following code or some kind of protocol or JSON output, and you dial up the temperature, suddenly it stops producing the appropriate output to actually execute what you said.
Yeah, I guess I meant more like, I haven't actually tried the chat. I don't know if we have it in the UK or I just haven't seen it. But I meant like on a holistic level as like a user. I'm still very just familiar with like, I like this song, create a new playlist from this song, but give me songs I haven't listened to before. Like on a user level, can I say, have you considered letting the users just be like, generally, I like, to discover more. I think in recommendations it's like serendipity, or I think that might be the metric or something. Have you considered maybe just setting it on a holistic level instead of through the LLM?
So that would be interesting if you had like a way to dial it up for all the products. The way Spotify is built now, you've got a home page which actually has separate pieces and sections that are driven by different algorithms. You've got search, browse, you've got your playlists, very different types of playlists being built for different purposes, and you've got AI playlists. So all of these products have their own models and code. To just say dial up everything might be a little tricky, but certainly as we go more and more towards these types of conversational ways of finding content, so the AI playlisting, which I think is available in at least some places in the UK.
I'm definitely going to look. Yeah, I didn't know it existed, so now I'm excited to try it.
Yeah, but you can definitely dial it up by saying, I want something serendipitous, and it'll use all those words and all that interaction, as well as your listening history and your actual real taste history to come up with a good playlist. So that's happening kind of as a mix of both classical recommendation techniques and this conversational LLM's suggestions.
Very cool.
Thank you very much. Whoa, it is loud. Tony, thank you very much. It seems like you and the team are focusing a lot on discoverability in terms of a key impact area for this technology. It would be great to hear, and I know you've touched on it a little bit in the conversation, is besides discoverability, where do you see the biggest areas of impact for agents and agentic technology?
Well, I think there is always, more for the agents to do. And right now, yes, you can discover things, but you cannot ask the agent to go in through your library and organize it differently. And so you've got tons of playlists. One day I can imagine you could say, hey, I want my playlist to be all organized in a easier way to kind of consume. I've just built these in the moment. And so you can imagine more of this, not really discovering new songs, which is really the important value add that we bring, but also just better organizing your content and your consumption. And you can imagine the agent doing more for you. You can say, hey, I want to wake up at 7 in the morning and I want to hear this kind of music, but change it up every day. Some energetic music, from something I've listened to in the past. Not necessarily a discovery of a new thing, but look at my history and kind of find something to wake me up with that I haven't listened to in a while. So all these types of tasks, jobs to be done that would be laborious for you to do, set up manually, I can imagine would be valuable additions beyond just discovery.
Okay, yeah, no, that's very interesting. Thanks. I mean, maybe just a short follow-up question is, have you considered how you spoke about this world of agents and agents interacting with each other instead of apps? Have you considered how Spotify would, if it was sort of my agent, how that would interface? So, for example, like, so waking up at a certain time might be, a process run by a different agent. Have you started considering things like that?
So I know these types of conversations are happening. We haven't really built anything that's, a multi-agent across apps system yet, but I know that's where things are going. I mean, we're already hearing Google Gemini saying, hey, I have a meeting to get to, it's on my calendar. Shouldn't my calendar automatically set up an Uber so I can get there on time, and it should be waiting for me, 20 minutes before the meeting so I get there on time. So a lot of that, I think, is what's kind of happening with a lot of the agent ecosystem that companies are trending towards. And so, yes, this is already being ideated. It's not like it's ready to go and fully built out, but I do think your music and your audio listening will be part of that world. Yeah.
So 2 questions, hopefully quick. So my first question is about when you guys use natural like LLM enhanced like natural language search, or just to say search. How much of it in the guardrail, like safety and guardrail space, is that you could directly leverage the existing, like, because when you do like traditional search, you also have those, we also have those like guardrail whatsoever, right? How much of that is like reusable for the new kind of search? And for LLM specific search, any additional, like anything new in the guardrail or safety space that we should pay attention to? And my second question is about, like, at Spotify, do you guys use LLMs to build into the capacity of content, like say localization, like, when you translate content or localize your offering, like say lyrics or other things, right? Like, it's not just simple translation, there's like localized version of the culture and context. Is that something you guys already use to build into the customer facing products, and what kind of product is that? Because I'm not Spotify user, unfortunately, because I work for Apple, so I use Apple Music. So.
Fair enough. I mean, I don't directly work on localization. We have an entire localization team that's separate, but I'm pretty sure they use the latest, greatest tools to localize. And to your point, it's not just a vanilla translation, but you have to capture, the local culture, et cetera, when you localize. So I don't know specifically what models are being used there, but we do have the latest, greatest for localization. And for your earlier question on search, we absolutely have safety layers in the search system. So when it gets more complicated and more conversational, you're not just searching for a track or something very deterministic, you will go through some safety layers, let's say, and those will sometimes change the output or sometimes restrict the output or make sure that whatever's being recommended is also safe content. So that's happening with an LLM-style safety layer. The key thing is latency. People really want search to be super fast. They expect instant results. And so if your latency is too low or too slow, then you start to put friction in the search experience, which is, something people quickly notice and get frustrated with. So you have to be safe and fast.
Do we have time for one more? It's a little bit of I know you got your, 2 more, okay. A little bit of an off-the-wall question, or maybe not so off-the-wall. So do you have an analog strategy to cross over to the analog world? So can you pull in my Discogs catalog and figure out my preferences and go in and make recommendations for things I should buy on vinyl?
That's a very interesting question. I'd love to be able to look at your vinyl collection. Sounds like it's an impressive one, but I don't know how we'd go about that. I think maybe one day, maybe taking pictures of things and uploading them or something, that would be cool. But yeah.
I have a feature for you.
All right. Yeah.
So there was one.
It's actually for me, but.
I have a quick question on future of it. do you also have anything on your roadmap where you're thinking of using AI for content creation?
So we work with human creators, and so AI is being used by those human creators. And so we're not necessarily in the creation business. We're a distribution platform, and we're connecting creators and consumers. And so the creators are already using these tools, and we encourage that. I think every artist is getting more and more creative if they have access to these tools. And so I think that's how we view it, that the artists have new ways to make better art. We're here to get them discovered. Just like we want consumers to discover more, we want creators to be discovered.
Great. Well, thank you, Tone. That is great. We did good for time now, George? Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Great conversation.